The Echo Chamber, brought to you by The Holmes Report and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers. Sponsored by the Bullet Group, putting you in tomorrow's conversations today.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. This is Arun Sudhaman from The Holmes Report, and I'm joined on today's show by Kanchana TK, who is the head and the board member for the Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India. Kanchana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Arun. It's a great pleasure to talk to you today.
I wondered if we could start by perhaps explaining what exactly, I'm going to call it OPPI because it's much less of a mouthful, what exactly OPPI does and what exactly you do at OPPI India.
So let me start with OPPI and its mission in India. So we're 54 years old, so we're middle-aged. But we've been here primarily to ensure that the Indian patient has access to world-class medicines, best-in-class treatments, and the latest medicines that could impact his life in a very positive way. That is the mission and vision of OPPI, and it has been so for the last 54 years. I lead OPPI on a three-part agenda. One is to advocate with policymakers to ensure that innovation, research, both are encouraged, not just by the way policies are designed, but also through working with the government and institutions in India. The second piece would be to encourage ethical marketing practices in pharma, and again work with policymakers to see whether India can come up with a mandatory policy, because it's critical for patients to know that the relationship that they share with the doctor is based on trust, and there are no other interferences from marketeers. I think that's a very critical advocacy angle. The other very important piece for the Indian ecosystem, for OPPI as an agenda, but more so for the patient, is the access to quality medicines and the value that it can bring to human life. I think these would be the three in the policy ecosystem that I work with the policymakers on. The second piece, of course, is the most important piece also, is the media. So the media being an extremely critical stakeholder, given that content in science, content in research, medical content, content of pharma is available today, but in bits and pieces, not so much tailor-made for India. So OPPI does take that role in tailor-making that content for Indian patients, the Indian ecosystem, and we try and work with multiple media partners, multi-channel media, to ensure that this message is delivered to the patient and to the end consumer in a simple form that they can understand, what it means for a pharma advocacy group that is advocating not only for a better ecosystem for India, but also for them. And the third and the most important piece actually is the patient advocacy. The patient advocacy is really working with patient groups that at this point have minimal access or no access to medicines that could be in the area of rare diseases, could be in the area of specialty medicine, could be in the area of AIDS, hepatitis C, which are public health issues, could, most importantly today, the big antibiotic threat that we all face, it could be in the area of working with patient groups to ensure that there's rational use of antibiotics. So I think it's a three-part agenda that I lead, but most importantly, the patient is at the center of all these activities.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the communications work you're doing at OPPI and the media challenges and opportunities. But before that, I wanted to find out how exactly you came to your current role, because before this, you were working in corporate affairs and public affairs for Bristol Myers Squibb. What was it about OPPI that attracted you, and what is it about the job that you particularly enjoy?
That's a great question. I think I had a bit of uh, a certain hesitancy before I really switched jobs. I had a few reservations, but I think all of them are unfounded today.
Mm,
I think OPPI is a platform that cuts across agendas of companies. So, we really, every company is a profitable entity. They have an agenda, and it's absolutely understandable. But OPPI cuts across those agendas. I think OPPI establishes a certain, responsibility that we have towards patients in this country. And it gives us an opportunity, like I said, to be creative, to be innovative, not just in the way we conduct our advocacy outreach, but also when we work with communication tools. We've been very innovative, very creative, and I think OPPI is able to give us that platform. So I think that is highly engaging for me.
mhm,
The reason I took this role was also because I recognized that when you work for individual companies, you're very caught up with the whole product portfolio, business numbers, limited access issues. But when you sit at the OPPI table, whether it's vaccines, which is preventive, whether it is your branded generic medicine, which is your everyday go-to medicines, whether it is your antibiotics, whether it is the most serious illnesses that get cured, whether it is hepatitis C or whether it is cancer, I think it cuts across all these portfolios, and I would never have been able to get that opportunity to be exposed to so much that the companies are doing if not for OPPI. So I think for me, OPPI got me not only exposed, but also gave me an opportunity to be responsible for not just talking about one portfolio of medicines, but we kind of looked at prevention, disease management, cure, and we can today sit and talk to media or to policymakers on the future of medicine, whether it
mm,
is biologics that are going to replace synthetic chemistry, whether it is technology that's going to play a role in the pharma world, whether it is 3D printing that's going to take over. I mean, it's amazing the spectrum of things that you can talk about when you're at OPPI. I think that really provides me an opportunity to grow in terms of my own knowledge. But also I think it also allows us an opportunity to work with policymakers to ensure that we become more innovative in policy making. Like we become creative in communications, we need to become more innovative in policy making because innovations are not just restricted to products. It's also about how policymakers view them.
mm. So let's talk a little about how you are becoming more creative in terms of communications. I mean, we are obviously aware that the whole communications approach is changing across the healthcare industry. Um, but for a long time, it hasn't been an industry that has necessarily been at the forefront of communications transformation. And secondly, of course, you're working at, you know, industry groups themselves have not always been necessarily the most forward thinking in terms of their kind of their communications activity. But that's a little bit different, I think, at OPPI because you've been doing some work which seems to be quite futuristic compared to the general approach to healthcare comms.
I think it's a great question, and I think I would really pass on the credit of being disruptive in a way, but also bold and creative to my team members, especially my colleague Bhavna. I think it takes a lot of effort when you have to step out there and in a traditional pharma ecosystem, which is true, which is what you said. Pharma
Mhm,
is traditionally very, risk averse. They do not want to take chances with the way the communication modules or methods or channels are. We are not very bold when we come to talking about our own work. I think at some point to take that bold decision to cut through a lot of traditional setting is hard, but we did it at OPPI. I also think at least for the innovator research industry, I think the associations, not just OPPI and even my colleague associations, whether it's pharma or it's IFPMA, we seem to be a little more bold because we represent the industry. And I think we have the opportunity there to step out there and say, okay, we're going to be creative about this piece of work. We are going to be a bit bold. We are going to say it like it is, because what is not there to say? I mean, we are spending years of our life. Our scientists are in the labs trying to create the next best thing to help people. I think somewhere to be able to go out there and say it in a very different way, in a very creative way, using different channels. I think it is a step that the associations have taken, including OPPI, taking the lead on it, especially for science and innovation. And I think it's a bit hard because when you try and establish science through art, it's got its own challenges. And the challenges are not because you don't know how to do it. It's just the challenges are both at the industry side and on the communication expert side. We've never done it before, right? So we're all kind of scoping each other out. But I think it's a great spot that we're slowly moving towards, where healthcare comms is kind of becoming bolder, very innovative, creative, focused on the final message. Of course, India, in India, we have to do a lot more work there. I think whether it's the clients here or it's the agencies or it's the channels, we're getting there. But the Brazilians have beaten us to that. They're really good. So,
yeah. So, could you give us some examples of the work that you've been doing and why you think it does help, perhaps, in reframing some of the traditional approaches to the challenges that OPPI and maybe the broader pharmaceutical industry faces in India?
Yeah. So, this is like a treadmill you can't get off. When you're between the media and the pharma industry, it's like we're just running to reach a goal, which I don't think either of us can reach, because I'll tell you the problem lies in when you're just talking prices, right? And you never talk about the efforts of innovation. I think we just turned it around. When we talk to people, I think the fact that we've always been asked questions about price, asked about why our access is not available, asked about a million things that really, we are not even supposed to be answering. It's hard when they don't understand the beginning of the story. And at the beginning of the story is in the labs, in the research and development, and in innovation. I think these things is what we needed to do to start talking about these things. The second thing is, I think in a post-truth world that we live in today, it's very hard to establish science as the hero. But we had to do that. There was no other way to communicate what we do, communicate the value of what we do, except establish science as the hero, which it is. Science is the hero. I think we turned that around. That's the first thing we did. The second piece is that I think pharma industries also recognized that just talking to traditional media will not help. They are very much a part of our plan. They're very much a part of our outreach, but just them will not help. So I think we also started talking to hybrid media. We started talking to audiovisual media, which is podcast, radios, YouTubes, blogs, short videos. But again, when you have to establish a lot of content, then we had to go to publication, because it's so much content to be able to be either delivered or absorbed by the audience through audiovisual mediums or hybrid mediums is hard. You can do short bits of it. But I think podcasts are something that we believe, and we are looking at doing something more in the future in the podcast space. We do believe it gives us an opportunity to take up the whole pharma value chain and break it up into bits and pieces and kind of narrate it in a story form where people are able to connect. So I would say using different channels, be more creative in content, customize content to the audience, also do and also keep it a bit engaging. I think what we do sometimes as the pharma industry, because we are so scientific, because we are so data driven, we tend to lose the connect with the audience, because after a point people lose us. And I think to be able to tell that in a story is something that OPPI has done very effectively and will continue to do so. And one of the things there I also wanted to mention was that all these things matter to patients, whether it is quality, whether it is over-the-counter drugs, whether it's antibiotic misuse, whether it is vaccinations, whether it is a cure for Alzheimer's, whether it's a cure for old age dementia or Parkinson's. Everything matters because everything happens in all our lives. It's just that we have to find a way to tell the story very engagingly. So, in a continuation or an effort to do this, we published, we kind of published, made public this book called In Science We Trust, where it is a book that talks about science as the hero, establishes what's happening in science, establishes what the future could look like. And the future is here right now as we speak. It's just that people need to know, like technology is changing their lives, so is science in healthcare. I think that understanding and that effort is what made us come out with this publication, which was very well received. In fact, we had the Honorable Prime Minister himself send us an acknowledgement in appreciation of this publication. And hopefully he felt it would encourage more research in the country. That triggered our second campaign that we launched this year in August, which focuses on research. We called it the Refreshing Research. It's a complete digital campaign. But what we made, we made it slightly different. We've actually engaged with the young minds in the country. We work with all the NIPERs, which are the pharmacy colleges owned by the government, as a first stage. We will have students drive this campaign. We have just created a platform. We expect them to drive it. We want to encourage students to pick up research and in science as one of their career options. Because unless we have innovation and research and development in India, respect for innovation and understanding of the effort of innovation will always be lacking. And that is important for us to do that. It's also very important for the country to establish good research centers and encourage young people to take up research. We're also trying through that campaign, we all know that if you know how to code, you're cool. But not too many people think that being a researcher or being an R&D person in a pharma company is cool, but I think it is. And I think the younger people need to choose research as one of their career options. We hope that this digital campaign, again, very innovatively designed, be having some fun elements. We're trying to get the students involved. We'll have a wildcard entry for other colleges to enter. We believe that this campaign will establish the importance of research in colleges, in science colleges, and will encourage, hopefully, more students to take up research as a career option in pharma.
Okay, excellent. So it sounds like it's been quite a thorough rethink of OPPI's and indeed the pharma industry's communication strategy and indeed its execution. Have you won over the media? As you have mentioned, I think the media can be skeptical when it comes to big pharma. I think in India, the media can be particularly skeptical. Have you won them over?
I think it's, I wouldn't use the word won over, but I would definitely say that we're talking to each other.
Hmm.
There is a point of view that we hold, and I think the media today appreciates that point of view. Um, of course, in countries like India, which are developing nations, they have a whole set of complex issues that are overwhelming and will continue to hold center stage. But I think the importance of innovation, respect for innovation, proper intellectual property rights, and it's not just pharma, it could be anything. I think the media has kind of accepted and respected us for that. I think we're happy
Hmm.
that we are unapologetic about being proud of our innovation, and we believe that intellectual property protection, it's not just for the pharma industry, for any innovation is critical for growth of new ideas and new innovations.
Now, of course, the media isn't your only stakeholder group. You're an organization of pharmaceutical producers, so you have numerous members that are stakeholders. Did you face any resistance to them when it comes to perhaps modernizing your approach to communications?
I think the industry members are and the pharma members of OPPI are very supportive.
Mm.
We've debated this many times. We have also agreed that it's time to be creative, to be more bold in our messaging. Because one thing that we've never forgotten in all our messaging or in all our creativity, that the patient remains still at the center. And I think what it also has done has kind of moved away from profit to purpose.
Mm.
I think the understanding that we're not here just for the profits. It is, we are here because we have a purpose. We have a purpose to deliver new cures, new treatments, better quality of life, prevention of diseases, and I think just better mortality. I mean, if you're going to live up to 100 years, we want you to live well. And I think the fact that that purpose also drives us, I think that is something that we've been able to establish, and that I would think is a more uh, I don't know if I would call it a modernization of communication. I think I would call it just sharp and focused messaging of our communication.
Mm. It's interesting because it's the kind of effort that I think will resonate because for the industry to stand for something more than just business as usual, you would think is a more powerful approach. And it's not. I mean, frankly, it's not something we see a lot of um, from many industry groups from other sectors. Let's say. So I think it is quite an interesting approach. How do you feel that it kind of ties into the broader transformation of communications in the healthcare industry?
Yeah, I think we're, if I can say this myself, it might sound extremely uh, pompous, but I think we're two steps ahead.
Mm.
I think the healthcare comms is moving more and more towards purpose. I think it's also moving towards understanding that while we all are doing what we're doing, innovation really is almost loses its utility if it is not delivered for the right purpose. I think
Hmm.
that if we are able to kind of establish clearly, I think half the battle is won. And I also think that healthcare comms as they move along, um, like I said, there's some fantastic campaigns that are coming out of Brazil,
Mm.
which are talking about the same thing. How do we use innovation not just in the way we deliver the message, but really, kind of on the ground, or using apps or using art? How do we really get people to be involved with their own health, right? So if you see the recent campaign that won at Cannes, the GSK China COPD. It was all about glass blowing. It was about art. It was about getting people to do something as simple as that to get them to see whether they really need to go to a doctor and do further tests. I think to be able to do those things, it also establishes purpose because, if you just look at it, honestly, we can just go about business as usual, talk about our products, talk about our brands, talk about, what we could do, but really trying to go a little beyond to start talking to the man on the street, if I may, to connect with him. We're trying to use all those tools, right? We're trying to use art, we're trying to use books, we're trying to use colleges, we're trying to use audiovisual. I think the attempt is there. I do believe all our member companies are doing some fantastic, phenomenal work over the last year. You will see much more of it. And I also think in a way technology is helping us to do that because we are able to use a lot of apps and a lot of AI, for example. There's this fantastic campaign on AI on a Parkinson's patient's mind because caregivers don't understand the mind and how do you use AI, right? So I mean it's brilliant. But those are the things I think will modernize communications, like you asked me last time, was using of technology, using of AI, using of maybe cartoons, I don't know, maybe using textbooks, but anything that can ensure that we connect with the common man to ensure that he understands what these companies are doing is extremely important. And I think companies are moving towards that. So that I would truly believe is a modernization of communications in a sense.
It's a really interesting point you made about innovation just for the sake of it. Just for my final question, is there a risk perhaps that people feel displaced or maybe even afraid of the pace of innovation?
True. I think that always happens with change. But I would say that I think people adapt. To me, I think ecosystems change. People adapt. Who knew, right? We would be talking in a podcast today about innovation. So I think in a way there is a bit of, there is of course some sense of yes, that it's possible that, in the face of all this, it might be overwhelming, it might be disruptive. But I think finally, as communicators, we need to respond to what the ecosystem is out there. And if the ecosystem out there is podcast, audiovisual, it's YouTube, it's talking to people through apps, AI, I don't know what it is, but if we are responsive, and tomorrow it could be something totally different. But I think that is the key job of communications, to ensure that we're responsive to our clients, to policymakers, and to the patients who are really, looking forward to being. And by the way, today we have extremely, curious customers. They are on technology all the time, and they love content. It's not that they don't. They are consuming content like never before. So I think one of the other things that pharma industries, across the globe, and especially our members, are doing is being very agile. Be it our business models, be it our communications, be it our policy making, we're very agile. And if you're not agile, you will end up being a fossil or a dinosaur. But I think that's where I would look at it.
Well, Kanchana, thank you so much for your time. It sounds like a fascinating time for the Indian pharma industry, and it's very interesting to see the work that is emerging. Hopefully we can get you on the show again in the not too distant future to talk more about some of your latest campaigns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arun. It's a pleasure talking to you.
You've been listening to The Echo Chamber. Brought to you by The Holmes Report and produced by Marketeers. Sponsored by the Bullet Group, putting you in tomorrow's conversations today.